items on the exam. From there, we build what's called an objective domain. The objective domain lists all of the skills that we're going to test on a particular exam. And then we can give that to our exam developers in the form of a blueprint. The blueprint will say, we need items or questions on this topic, this may be the topic, but the environment should be this number of users, this number of subnets, and it'll be really specific to the type of an organization that we're targeting as well. Then we have experts from around the world, not Microsoft employees. In fact, we rarely have Microsoft employees who develop the items. These are mostly technical experts in the field who we put under contract and non-disclosure agreements, and they come in and they'll develop the items. Then we do what's called an alpha review, where we get experts, including those in Microsoft and outside of Microsoft, to review all of those items for accuracy, revise them if needed. Then we field test it in the beta. Our betas are free. Many of you have probably taken our betas before. If you take the betas, they're hours in length. You get a chance to see every question, but not every question you see may be a good one. That's the purpose of the beta. From there, we'll look at which items did well. Now, if we have an item that everybody failed, even people who are really good at the job and did well on the rest of the exam, to us, that's a bad performing item. We don't want trick questions. Right? So we'll take that out, throw it out. If we have one that everybody got and nobody missed, we know it's probably too easy, so we'll throw that one out too. From there, we do what's called standard setting, and that's where we determine the weighting of the items on the exam. And we set our final score. Divide those items up into particular forms so that if you take the exam multiple times, hopefully you won't need to, but if you do, you won't get the same questions, and publish it. And so that's our kind of intricate process, start to finish. We'll also localize into several different languages, and then do ongoing review of performance just to make sure that it stays valid. Now, I mentioned the scoring. Most people know that to pass an exam, you need to get a 700, right? I think you guys know you've taken exams. Most people assume that 700 out of 1,000 means 70%. Kind of makes sense, right? Actually, is not so. Every exam has its own individual passing score. It's not really 700. The items themselves are weighted differently. What we do is we kind of hide the actual passing score, do all of the weighting and the calculations in the back end, and then we recalculate onto a scale from 0 to 1,000 to show how you did, and then give you a score that represents how well you did relative to what the maximum possible score should be. There are some exams where it's not even possible to get 1,000, where a perfect score wouldn't even be up that high, just because of the number of items on the exams and the weight on them. So you do need to have a 700 to pass anything, but that doesn't mean 70%. Here's another myth about exams. We often hear, why don't you have some kind of a master level, or why don't you require your trainers to have a higher score than the rest of the general population? And one of the things that psychometrics tells us is that people who pass with, say, an 800 or a 900 are actually not any more competent statistically, over the long haul, than people who pass with a 700. So we set those scores so that anyone who passes 700 or higher, that is really the only mark on that spectrum where we can say that people are competent. And the reason for that is that in any given job, you're going to have some variation in tasks. Not everybody's going to use every feature. Not everybody's going to encounter every situation. And based on the luck of the draw, when you sit down to take an exam, you may get some questions that you just don't deal with. You may get some questions that you deal with every day. And so we try to set that passing mark such that you may get a 900 on the exam. It may just have been lucky that you got a whole bunch of questions on stuff that you do. But it shouldn't be possible to pass with if you got a 600, for example, we're pretty confident that no matter which questions you drew, unless you actually had those skills, you would not have been able to pass. All right, I got another 2 minutes. Okay, what to expect and how to prepare. I think most of you know the format of the exams. They are multiple choice or multiple answer. The best way to prepare, there's a lot of stuff up on here. Yeah, you can go to edge.technet.com. I think that's a great resource, MSDN for developers. There's all sorts of practice tests and things out there and review guides. Here's my best tip for preparing. Just do your job. If you are doing your job and you're doing it well, then these exams should be very easy. And I'll make that statement without any reservation whatsoever. We don't write this exam to be tricky. We don't write the exams to be hard. We write them to be valid. So for people who are studying to get a new job that they've never done before, yeah, it would be difficult. They should go and do lots of review and practice. But for those of you, and all of you I think are in IT and have been for years, if you've been using for, how many of you have been using Windows Server 2008 for the past year but are not certified in it? Okay. I'm willing to bet that you could go and take those exams and do very well and pass. If you've been using that product in doing the job, you should find that, I would recommend going to the certification page on Microsoft.com. Go to Microsoft.com/learning. Take a look at the exam skills measured by our MCTS on Windows Server 2008, and I bet you'll find that you know already the skills that we're looking for. It's well worth doing. All right. And the last thing I wanted to share with you is, especially for those of you who have been certified for a while and been working with Windows Server or Exchange or Windows Client for a while, if you'd like to get involved and be one of our subject matter experts that helps us write items or review items, we'd love to have your participation. We do pay, of course, for your work. It would be only the right thing to do. It is a great opportunity. To become one of our reviewers or item writers, there's a few different ways you can do it. One of the best ways is just to watch our blog, because every time we have a particular opportunity where we need some good, talented people, we'll advertise for it. We also have a subject matter expert database on connect.microsoft.com where you can just go and enter your own information. We will link to this every time that we advertise for an opportunity on the blog. You can also complete the exam satisfaction survey. If you don't want to be an item writer, but you do want to give us feedback, when you take those exams, I can promise you every survey that gets completed, someone looks at in our group. And then another, probably the most common question I've ever gotten on certification is, what do I do if I think something was wrong? How many of you think taking an exam and there was a question that you were pretty sure was wrong? Okay. If that happens, there is a challenge process. And you can see the whole policy up at this long URL here. But basically, if you go to the Microsoft.com learning page, go to the FAQ. It's one of the most prominent questions on the FAQ. And you can challenge us within a certain amount of time after having taken an exam. So it's an email that you send. You need to give us as much specifics as possible so that we can go and find the items, so try to remember it. I know you can't take notes and take them with you. So just make sure that you remember as much as possible. And we'll review it. And if we need to make changes to it, we will, and we'll correct your score accordingly. Or if it's a security issue that you want to report to us, if you think that there's been cheating going on, if you find a brain dump out there on the internet, you can report stuff to us through this alias tctips@microsoft.com. All right. With that, I think it's time to get into the good technical stuff. You ready, Stephen?
I am.
All right. Anybody have any questions about certification before we get started? Okay, we'll have some Q&A time at the end of the day, too. All right, with that, I'm going to introduce Stephen Rose, who's going to introduce us to Windows 7.